Hello friends, welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti and today I'm talking about The Seventh Sense by Buchanan. I finally finished reading this book and I took some notes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the book, but I also wanted to just kind of bring us into the present moment with UFO disclosure and start off by recapping some of the current events. So it's mid-December 2025. And in the last episode, I talked about the Age of Disclosure documentary that just came out by Dan Farah. The whole community's abuzz. Everyone's talking about it. But just like I said in my initial response to that documentary, there is a little bit of a flavor of fear-mongering to this piece. And while it is very important and has a lot of really good information, it also has a bit of a tone that we have to keep an eye on because people who are getting into this now might get really scared and then want to start taking action in the wrong direction. And it's important to slow down. There's a lot of history here. There's a lot of work that's been done. But the crazy thing is, because of the disinformation and because of the way that this truth has been shaped and withheld from the public, there are people living their lives who have never even thought about this, and maybe they never will, or if they learn about it, they're going to feel completely almost broken inside, like sick inside, because they're going to feel so cognitively dissonant. They're going to feel that cognitive dissonance, and they're just going to freak out, and then maybe that is a recipe for disaster. So I just want to read what Danny Sheehan said in one of the recent newsletters from the New Paradigm Institute. We applaud the filmmakers and all who participated in helping make the documentary possible. At the same time, we believe the project presents a perspective overly concerned with national security. At New Paradigm Institute, we approach this UFO UAP subject through a lens of concern for human rights, environmental responsibility, ethical governance, and the need to evolve human consciousness. Our position on the implications of the existence of ETs on or near Earth remains clear. The presence of non-human intelligence to date appears benevolent, and hence the disclosure effort offers humanity an unprecedented opportunity to lean into cooperation, peacemaking, and interplanetary and intraplanetary friendship rather than fear and militarization. We will continue to support public viewings of the Age of Disclosure while also encouraging deeper conversations about diplomacy, higher consciousness, and the future we want to build together as a species. So cool. So classy. You guys have been following this with me, hopefully. If you're new to the channel, UFO Deep Dive starts on episode 1, and if you go through all the episodes in order, you'll be well versed in the topic and all of the tangent topics. So this channel is designed to onboard people to UFO history and knowledge of the paranormal and the anomalous with a gentle, what's the vibe? It is study hall. This is our little study hall in the School of Life because we need to take it upon ourselves to dig around and learn about the things that have been kept from us. And a lot of people have been doing that, and I am but a student, but I love to read about these things and learn about them. And so this book, The Seventh Sense, is going to get back to our remote viewing topic, which is my interest right now in terms of a personal practice, how I'm developing my own psi abilities. I'm now up to 105 public sessions on social remote viewing, social-rv.com. And you can look at my sessions if you want to see how I'm doing if you join that site. It's free. You get really interesting targets, and it's a great way to practice and begin to understand your own abilities. And these things are kind of like cross-training. I was in an energy workshop earlier today because I do these every once in a while. I'll meet up with this group and do some energy exercises together over Zoom. And we had a really beautiful session today, and the teacher today was reminding us that everybody's energy system is different, so we all feel it differently, perceive it differently, we move it differently. I'm getting really drawn to all of the people online who are practicing PK or telekinesis, psychokinesis or telekinesis, and those are the ones who are able to affect matter with their mind or to move objects with their mind. And it's kind of along the lines of energy healing or martial arts. It's the same thing that many cultures have been practicing for all of human history. And there's just many different forms and different ways of interacting with energies. Tom Campbell just talks about using your intent to modify future probability. Some people are really more physical with it, more spiritual with it. Others, it's kind of like the Matrix. Whatever metaphor works for you, essentially, I believe it is all the same thing at the end of the day, and it may be a little bit out of reach in terms of our current capacity for understanding. So that's why it's good to practice just suspending your disbelief and being playful and going back into that childlike mind. If you're really curious about opening up your own psi abilities or you want your own understanding of it, I highly recommend relaxing the analytical right brain. Or no, sorry, the left brain. Oops, I always get them switched. I remember though, because the left hand activates the right brain, and that's the creative brain, because I'm right-handed, and so I always think, oh, my non-dominant hand needs to be utilized more if I want to stay in touch with my creative brain side. When I use my right hand, I'm activating the left side, which is the analytical side. Oh, let me check my sauce real quick here. Okay. The heat just kicked on, but also I'm making some spaghetti sauce that I needed to turn off, so I thought the oven was making noise, but it was really just the heat. Anyway, right brain, left brain, use your whole body, movement, music, art, meditation, and all creative practices can help to activate your psi abilities, but the best way to get in touch with them is to work them, just like you would work out a muscle at the gym. That's where social RV comes in, and that's what I learned about in this book by Lynn Buchanan. So let's get into the notes on this book. Leonard Lynn Buchanan is now retired from the U.S. Army Intelligence. He has used remote viewing to assist police and federal agents in locating missing children, and founded his own company called PSI, Problems, Solutions, Innovations, a little play on Psi, which is also PSI, a company that helps corporations develop solutions for intelligence-related data acquisition. Considered to be one of the best remote viewing trainers, he lives in Alamogordo, New Mexico with his wife Linda, or at least that's what it said when this book was published. Last I heard, he was at the IRVA conference in Cloudcroft, New Mexico just a couple months ago. And people were going out to his ranch somewhere in New Mexico to do some sky watching and bend some spoons, things like that. Kelly Chase was out there, and she had quite an interesting experience. Lynn sounds like a really cool guy, and he's still alive. He's still doing interviews once in a while, and seems like he's definitely still involved in all the psi research. Probably has tons of interesting connections too. So in chapter 1, we learn about like how it all started for him. He was a military guy. He is reporting to a new military unit at Fort Meade, Maryland, and it's this very mysterious circumstance where he was kind of tapped on the shoulder and then brought to this place. He was given one set of written orders, like you're to report to this 902nd whatever field office, and then he's given a verbal set of orders that say, don't actually go to that office, go over here instead. Whatever you do, don't ever go there. So it's already off to a good start, and this is like how so many of these stories go, really mysterious, like somebody comes and kind of like pulls you into a program. But, you know, they're not just pulling people off the streets, they're pulling people who are already in the military. So that's another really interesting thing about a lot of these people. You know, they either worked as a secretary for some military office, or they were actually in the army or military when they got pulled into one of the secret programs. The other area that people get pulled from are intelligence agencies, it seems like. But there's a lot of crisscross. And so right now, that's how the book starts. And this was all like after the initial inciting incident that caused him to get that tap on the shoulder. So we're going to go back and talk about that. Basically, he was working first as a Russian linguist and then in computer operations and coordination. He was coordinating almost 100 different computers at the field station with several different countries of origin. And the computer systems didn't talk to each other, so there was constant conflict among all the data fields, and the computers and the countries who ran them were all in constant disarray. So, I mean, in that office. And so he was designing a program that would tie them together and get everything to communicate. And he was about to give a big demonstration to more than a dozen different NATO countries that had personnel at this field office. So basically, he gives this whole spiel, and he goes to hit enter on the button to run the program and give the demonstration, but the computer just doesn't start. And somebody in the audience is just chuckling a little bit, and that's this guy who he already has beef with, somebody named Doug, or at least that's what he calls him in the book. And that guy goes, "Gotcha." And this triggers the uncontrollable rage that wells up in him, as you can imagine if your nemesis totally just sabotaged your important presentation and made you look like a fool in front of all these important people. And he kind of loses control for a second here. But I'll tell you what happens when he loses control, but let's go back in time yet again to even earlier, because the way he's telling the story is like, you know, first this happened, then, you know, he's kind of going backwards in time and then bringing us back up to speed with where he started his training. So we're leaving this computer mishap and going all the way back to his childhood, and he had these abilities growing up. Like, he had this ability to influence the things around him, but he didn't really know how to control it. He didn't know what it was. He had a little bit of like PK going on early on. Like, he was having an impact on physical things. Things were moving around him. And he grew up in the South, and basically this, I believe he said it was in the South, actually. Oh, well, it's not in my notes, but that's what it was in my mind. In any case, I think he might have said Bible Belt or something, but it's a Pentecostal minister that ends up scaring the living you-know-what out of him. And what happens is he has a little crush on a girl, and he shows her some kind of trick. Maybe he said, like, boom, I can move this thing. He doesn't exactly say what it is, but, like, you could imagine maybe he just, like, moved something a little bit with his mind, or levitated something, or was able to do something cool that she was impressed by, but it almost scared her a little bit, and she went and told on him right away, and she told her dad, who's this minister, and then the minister ambushed him, basically saying, like, come on, son, show us that trick you showed my daughter. They wanted to see if it was real. He brought a couple of his deacons with him. Little Leonard, showed the trick, and then these guys just, like, smash him to the ground, to the sidewalk, and they're, like, screaming for the devil to get exorcised out of him, basically. And he's completely traumatized, as you can imagine. It's a very scary experience, and also he's really questioning himself. And, you know, I'm skimming through these notes, but the truth is, like, if you have the time, read these stories, because there's so much depth to it. It's really interesting to hear about, like, how he thought and felt about himself during this childhood phase of his life, because he knew something was going on. He knew he had this ability. His subconscious mind was extremely powerful, and he almost had this little voice that he could hear that would allow him to do what he called neat tricks. And he would use that voice to kind of guide the process, or it would guide him. And of course, now he's just questioning everything, feeling like, oh, that's probably the devil tricking me. I should be really afraid. The brainwashing was heavy. The impact that those guys had on him was very strong. And needless to say, he stopped messing with this stuff for pretty much his entire life. And a couple other things happened that were uncontrollable. But what happens at this moment of the computer mishap was really undeniable. And so basically, here's a little quote about the way he was recognizing his subconscious power. I now know that the subconscious mind, once given its freedom, doesn't give up that freedom without a fight. I didn't know back then. At the time, to my guilt and horror, I might have meant to say guilt there, to my guilt and horror, I think, it seemed that the more I stopped doing my purposeful, neat things, the more the unbidden things increased. He quickly learned that getting angry was almost certain to bring on an unbidden incident. These incidents were usually bad things in hindsight, and I was always sorry for them later, yet at the time they happened, they seemed to save me from some bully or help someone else who was in need. The things that happened always gave me some instant satisfaction because I was suddenly able to take control of bad situations and turn them to good. But later, I would see how the devil had tricked me again, and then the guilt would set in. I've had experiences like this. The one that's popping into my mind right now is all the way back from just after my college years, and I don't know how appropriate this story is to share with a wide audience, but let's just say someone was making an unwanted advance on me and shouldn't have been, and he ended up with a broken nose, and I never touched him with my body. He tripped and fell before he came close enough to me. And at the time that it happened, it felt so cosmic to me. It was like, what the hell just happened? Like, I actually felt like something had intervened, and it was just like, oh hell no, this is not allowed to happen, or she's already been through enough, like, no, you're not going to be the one, not today, and it was like boom, and it totally derailed the whole situation, de-escalated. Of course, he was completely preoccupied with his own situation with his nose after that, and no longer interested in what he was interested in right before that moment. So it's kind of cool, but kind of scary. Like, you don't want to just be accidentally hurting people in the world. And I'm not claiming that I have the same thing that Lynn Buchanan had. I'm just saying that, like, there were a couple times throughout life, and maybe you've had them too, like, where you start to wonder, was my energy influencing the situation a little bit? Or maybe my angels and guides were intervening, but you kind of wonder, My mom used to say that I walked so heavy when I was a kid that I would shake the entire trailer when I was mad or when I was just, like, in a mood. And when I think about it now, I'm like, my little tiny kid body could not possibly be strong enough to shake even a trailer. They are kind of dinky, I don't think. But it was happening, maybe. Or maybe it was just hyperbole. But anyway, there were lots of little things like that where I was just like, oh yeah, like, our energy can be bigger than us. And it can do things outside of our physical containers. And I've known so many people who will say things like, oh yeah, electronics break around me, the lights flicker around me, maybe plants wiggle and sway when you come near. Maybe animals act a certain way around you. Maybe you've used your energy to kind of keep your car running when it was about to fall to pieces, and you just got it to go just a little further than it should have technically. Little things like that. So again, don't take any of this too seriously. Don't get all, like, spun out on it. Just keep an open mind, because this is the pathway. Imagination is the pathway, and you don't want to be annoying about it. It's so annoying. Like, when people go too far with it and they're too imaginative, you're not really grounded in reality, then it's, like, also not productive, because you got to get feedback. And that's, again, going back to remote viewing as a practice. It's so great because you can't lie to yourself. You either did or you didn't get correct information about the target. And then all those other things can be kind of fun to think about and wonder about, but that's not the stuff that we're basing our understanding of our psi abilities on. That's just like extra stuff. And sometimes it's important. You know, you don't want to totally throw it out, but try to stick to things that give you actual feedback or yield a positive result. You know, they produce some kind of actual result, like healing work that yields an actual test result, or even if it's just something you're feeling, you were able to like diminish pain in your body. That's incredibly powerful. No one else might be able to measure that, but it's still meaningful. So anyway, we're back in his childhood, and he tells one more story about like his powers kind of getting away from him. And it was this moment when a bully rode up on his bike and kind of pushed him off his bike by riding by really fast. And he just had that uncontrollable feeling like you do when you feel really hurt by someone, and your inner protector flares up. And he just said to himself, his mind just said die in his mind. And he didn't even mean to. It just came out. And that kid immediately went flying off his bike over a parked car and into oncoming traffic, where the car stopped right in front of him. And thank the universe did not end him, but his head was under the bumper and it was a couple inches from the tire. And so that was another moment where little child Lynn was kind of like, oh my God, I'm evil, you know? And those priests were right. And what am I going to do? So now fast forwarding again in time, we're back in Augsburg, where that voice comes over him again when that man, Doug, says like, gotcha, ruined your presentation, made you look like a fool in front of everyone. That little voice flares up, and all of a sudden, those are my sound effects of all the computers shutting down in the entire field office. But honestly, it was like an electromagnetic pulse or something, an EMP, but it was really just his energy. So listen to this. For days, the US and other NATO countries that had facilities at the field station had no electronic intelligence along the East German border. He knew it had been his fault, but he kept quiet. Software analysts checked to see whether the program he had designed caused the computers to crash, and determined it had not. The final report even said that it was the computers crashing that had caused his demo to fail. Years later, he learned that the affected area had been from the North Sea down to Italy, and intelligence computers in Australia had been affected as well. The East Germans, Bulgarians, Czechs, and Soviets had also lost all electronic eavesdropping equipment at the same moment. So, what's interesting, though, is not just that this happened, but that somebody was watching. There was a man at that presentation, the commanding general of U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, USA INSCOM, and his name was Major General Albert N. Stubblebine. Well, he wasn't actually there, but Stubblebine was the one that had his little people out in the world scouting. So Stubblebine, at that time, had an interest in psychic abilities, and due to his interest in mental phenomena, several of his officers had been trained to spot such human potentials, quote unquote. And one of those officers had observed Lynn Buchanan at the moment of the event. He had seen the incident take place and recognized it for what it was. That officer turned in a report of what he had seen and suspected, and then Lynn gets called in. So this is how he gets that little tap on the shoulder. And when he gets called into this field station commander's office, everybody leaves the room and it's just him, and the man is up in his face, really intimidating and scary and mean, and he just says, "Did you kill my field station with your mind?" And Lynn Buchanan has like a flash in his mind, a second where he thinks like, should I lie? And then he's just like, I there's no point in lying. Like it happened, and this guy already knows. And he was just like, yes, sir, I did. And then the man is silent for what feels like hours, just looking him in the eye, trying to make sure he's telling the truth. And then all of a sudden he cracks a smile and says, "Far fucking out," which is just hilarious. And Lynn tells this story a lot. You know, I'm retelling his story from the book just to give you a teaser and get you excited about the book, and just to hear about like how like a movie these lives are that these men have led, and women too. But it's just so interesting and funny, and I think that it's also like really boring. There's tons of long stretches of like boring exercises where they're just training and they're in these plain ass, ugly ass military buildings, and you know, they can barely have any kind of relationship with anyone else around them. So it's like, it reads like a movie, but then also you see like, oh, you're stuck in this kind of bureaucratic red tape world, and it's not as glamorous all the time as like some of these really fun peak moments are. So yeah, he gets called in to do this secret program. They want to train him to be a remote viewer. They send him to the Monroe Institute. He goes on to describe some of his trainings, very long, tedious exercises that he and others had to do to develop their psychic skills. He talks about how a remote viewer's worst enemy is his or her own imagination. So seeing each other's work was guaranteed to ratchet the imagination into overdrive, so there's a lot of separation going on. People are kept separate. People are doing separate parts of the target sometimes, and there's always these monitors who are compiling the information and helping to make sense out of all of it. So that was from my notes from like the beginning of the book. I'm just going to kind of flip through intuitively. We're going to find some interesting little quotes and moments. And here's something, because I keep hearing about Gorbachev recently, and let's just read it. Okay, over the next 2.5 months, I worked repeatedly to instill the idea into Gorbachev's mind that communism was not working on many financial, social, military, and political levels. Oh, okay, so this is so cool. What this is about, I'm going to keep reading it, but this section is an area where basically once he gets powerful, they're always trying to get him to do more. They're like, can you kill someone with your mind? And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that, you know? But they want to see how far they can push these skills and abilities, which is important. These little tidbits from these personal stories are very important to keep track of, because they are indicators of just how far this stuff has actually gone. And if somebody was asking someone to do this and that person said no, you can be guaranteed that another person said yes or could be coerced. You know what I mean? So just little things to keep an eye on. Like when we learned about Ingo Swann on this channel, I told a story of like some remote viewers who influenced a whole segment of the population to just drop off their voting ballots in a certain area that was different from where they normally did. And it had like an 80% efficacy rate, if I remember correctly, something like that. Bottom line being that some experiments have been done. So there's always more going on under the surface that we're not hearing about. So controlled remote influencing is something that Lynn Buchanan had a special talent for. He was able to merge minds with other consciousness units, I would say, other people, and have an impact on them. So he used this on Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev. They wanted him to kill him. He said he wouldn't do that, but he said he would work on him and see if he could access his subconscious. And he started using specific phrases. I used specific phrases that I had designed to access his subconscious mind where they would have the most effect. But after 2.5 months of working, nothing happened. So I gave up and began working on other things. I think that I was probably the most surprised person in the US when Gorbachev made his famous speech that effectively ended communist rule in Soviet Russia. Had I had some influence on his decision? I did not know. It took me another month, but I finally got a transcript of his speech, and within it were all of the subliminal phrases I had been trying to pump into his subconscious during my session. He goes on to say, I have no grandiose illusions that I brought about the end of communism in Russia. Ending communism was a logical and intelligent thing to do at the time, and I truly believe that it would have happened had I not been involved, but I still wonder, did I just pave some subconscious pathways that allowed the thoughts to occur more easily? Just as I do not have the ability to say honestly that I did play a role in the process, I also cannot honestly say that I did not. I will always be left to wonder. great way of looking at it because, of course, nobody is this all-powerful controller or manipulator. We're all just, each one of us has a certain amount of influence in reality and ability. And so we're like casting our vote, our energetic vote to influence future probabilities. So we might be able to add to something, and that is very powerful. It's kind of like at the end of the day, all of this psychic stuff should empower us all to kind of move the collective in a positive, loving, beneficial direction for all. And we just have to get our subconscious kind of under control so that we're moving in that good direction, doing what we can with our little bit of influence, because none of us are going to be like here to save the day and do everything. And even all these like whistleblowers and UFO people that come forward and feel like the chosen one, you're just one of many. Lots of people have been on board a ship. Lots of people have been abducted or visited or have had encounters with other kinds of non-physical entities. Lots of people have had downloads. Lots of people have had visions. Lots of people have met secret people in secret programs and learned about a little bit about what they've been up to. So it's about collective momentum and getting a big enough wave of human consciousness to actually elevate to that next level of our maturity as souls so that we can actually open and receive the communications from more of these intelligent beings. My tea is really good. To be honest, it's a hot toddy. That's why it's so good. It's winter. You gotta have a little treat sometimes. So they have him working on Saddam Hussein a lot, and he has to like get in his head and know what his next moves are, and he had a lot of success with that. They talk about these things called esoteric targets, which are like targets where you can't get feedback, and sometimes he was asked to do things like that. Let's hear this part here. Okay, when we asked to have the ET targets stopped, he continued to give them to us. This is this one boss that was super into like using the remote viewers for his own curiosity. And these are the esoteric targets. At one point, we approached the director about the problem, and the director gave him the direct order to stop using such targets. He complied for a few weeks and then instituted what he called advanced training. His advanced training was nothing more than more UFO crashes, ET colonies on other worlds, galactic council meetings, and so forth. When the viewers finally rose up in anger and gave an ultimatum, that kind of targeting finally stopped. This had lasted about 2 or 3 months, but today that man is out in the civilian world telling everyone how he ran the unit and had his viewers do advanced training on esoteric targets. So there's a lot of people from these stories who have branched out and gone their different directions, have their different companies, done their different circuits of interviews or whatever, written books. Some of them are friends, some of them are not friends. It's kind of like fun to just see the little connections, like, oh, I see that name in this story. He was working with this person. She was talking on this other thing. Yeah, and that's kind of cool. So, let's see. Okay, so he's mentioning here, and we've talked about this before with some of the episodes on remote viewing history. By the way, if you don't have time, if you like this kind of casual study hall of life kind of thing, you don't have to watch all the Shocks Talks. You can go to the ones that are recap episodes, and I try to condense like a lot of information into a short, or it might be like an hour covering a whole season instead of like 40-minute episodes where you go really in depth. But I encourage us all to resist the urge to always look for bite-sized content. This is why I allow myself to do long form and to be a little more loose with it, because I love that. When I consume it, I benefit from the nuance, from people's personalities, from the little tidbits that come up that are conveyed through like movement or voice, or not just like a fully scripted, fully edited, perfectly concise information packet. It's kind of like boring, I think. And why are we in such a rush? Let's take our time with these things. Let's digest it slowly and really let it seep 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 into our psyches. Oh my gosh. It's been quite a week. The energy has been crazy this week. I brought home a new roommate in the form of a cat. He's awesome. But it's been emotional because I only lost my dog like a couple of months ago. And so his spirit is still here. His altar is still up. And also now there's this other creature. So we're all vibing together and the energy is shifting in the house. And work has been crazy. I'm sure you've been going through it too. When are we not? So it's fun to just get lost in a story, and it's been hard for me to actually sit down and like do my intense research, but I was able to at least finish this book and make some notes. So back to our story. So Lynn Buchanan is talking about how during the time that he was training, he was aware that like Russia also had really advanced psychic programs going on. You should understand too that there were units in other countries, Russia especially, that did not practice psychic spying as much as psychic influencing and control. Had this information fallen into their hands, every member of the unit would have become a target for them. In other words, this was the equivalent of an attempt on his part to actually kill the unit and everyone in it. So I think this is just back to that guy. That guy was compromising them because he was like so obsessed with his own interests. Let's see. This is a funny line that I underlined. As contradictory as it may sound, you can find within the New Age community some of the most closed-minded people in the world. And isn't that the truth? Everybody, it doesn't matter what your background is, you're either actually open-minded or you're not. And it goes for New Age, it goes for political, I'm not even going to say which or who or what, but like some people get on such a high horse and at the same time are like so closed off to any information that differs from their paradigm and their worldview, and that is very limiting. Gonna kind of skim. So he says psychic functioning has been a part of our culture since the dawn of man. And then this is in chapter 7, what do we do with it now? He goes into like the strengths and weaknesses of CRV, which is controlled remote viewing. And, you know, it's not a totally perfect machine. There are some things that work really well and things that don't. Again, he talks about different people's types and styles of psychic sensing. It's not always the same for everybody. He talks about this thing, perfect sight integration, I thought was really interesting. So this is when you kind of have like that parallel processing where you're kind of out of body, but you're still in your body, but you're in the place and you can sense it. Like, oh, I can smell the popcorn. I can hear a little bit of music. Oh, now I'm seeing a game. Okay, I think I'm at a carnival. It's like you're in the place and it's coming to you. He talks about times when he had those perfect sight integration experiences, but it's funny because he'll say he never had an out of body except for the first time he went to Monroe, and it was an out of hand experience where only his hand came out. And that must have been such a distinct feeling for him that he categorized that as out of body. But what he calls perfect sight integration, I think some people, like even Tom Campbell, would call that shifting data streams. He doesn't even like to use the term out of body because really it's just like, imagine that you're turning on or off a faucet. That's the data stream. And the one we're in normally is like going full force. But sometimes when you meditate or do these other practices, you start to turn on the other faucet next to it or something, and now you're in that stream, but this one's still on a little bit, and sometimes it turns all the way off and you're totally over there, and sometimes a little bit, and they're both equal and you're in both realities at the same time. It's all just consciousness perceiving data. It's information. So you could imagine that it's pretty much infinite in terms of how information can be rendered within our own consciousness. So our ability to access information at a distance is a totally normal human ability that everyone is doing a lot of the time and isn't always aware of. And then it's also something that can be trained and fine-tuned to really get precise information. But you have little senses about things all throughout the day, every day. And back in the day, people had to have more of that when we were less domesticated and we were more out in the wild and we needed to rely on our senses more. So a lot of indigenous cultures maintained practices that allowed them to continue cultivating those abilities. And for whatever reason, the modern Western, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of this global culture now. But we have squashed out a lot of our innate abilities. I think that probably has a lot to do with these institutions of power and control that don't want everyone to be equally empowered. And so there's a lot of brainwashing going on. There's a lot of systems in place that limit our ability to function to the fullest extent. And a couple episodes ago, I said something about wouldn't it be amazing if all humankind could just have the ability to influence the energy of the food we ate and bless it so that we could be nourished even if you were poor and couldn't afford the best food ever. And somebody in the comments was a little bit well, we need actual solutions. And I agree, we do. And I never mean to be dismissing the need for actual actions to be taken within the current system, because we got to work with what we've got. So that's where we're at. But if you listen to the newest episodes of the telepathy tapes, it is mind-blowing. They're getting into energy work, and the things that I'm dreaming of and envisioning are not that far out of reach. And in fact, some people are already doing things like a Chinese medicine doctor who can extract teeth by using a mantra and just plucking the tooth out gently without any pain or putting someone under. No big, messy, clunky surgery, no tools, no having to be in a sterile environment and all this waste and all this trash. I mean, it's so elegant. It's absolutely brilliant. That's the future I want, I want more of us with powers, because we could be living a better life together and taking care of the earth. And if you listen to the latest American Alchemy episode with Jesse Michaels, he is getting into an abduction story where, again, the aliens were saying, you guys, we're here. We've been here. That you're the fifth generation of beings on the earth. You're the aliens, not us, we're around. There's interdimensional beings. They're all at a higher level of consciousness than us, and they're waiting. They cannot show themselves to us fully until enough of us level up. So that's why I'm all right, let's get going. What can I do? What exercises do I need to do? How do I need to expand my consciousness? And not just having powers, but how do I evolve my soul's maturity level so that I can be trusted with the level of power that we are rising up into, Like Lynn Buchanan talking about needing to control his emotions. That's a great story to illustrate why we're not quite there yet. We can't just give everyone, if the universe, if the system of life itself in the virtual sense could do a massive system upgrade and just give everyone these new abilities, it would be mayhem. It would be a total chaos, because we don't have the emotional, spiritual maturity to handle it. So that's why in yogic practices and other ancient traditions, they take you on a slow and long path, progressing through all these different levels of attainment before you can get to the level where you're able to influence more around you, more outside of yourself. But there's ways to bypass that, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the military has learned those ways and is actively using them on a regular basis. Let's see. But we're all okay, more or less, right? We're still okay. We're protected in a lot of ways. It's just how people are getting scared of this threat of aliens, but then the people who have been studying it for a long time are kind of you guys, they're the ones that have stopped us from blowing ourselves up a couple of times, more than a couple of times, for better or for worse. They're the big siblings around here. We're the little evil toddlers. You know how toddlers go through an evil dictator phase? That's basically us. I mean, the aliens that this president talked to on American Alchemy. He's let me just go to the episode so I can say who it was because I don't remember his name. It is President of the Russian Republic. Let's see. What's this? Let's see his name. Kirsan Ilyumzahov, former president of the Republic of Kalmykia. Kalmykia. I don't know how to say that. Longtime president of the World Chess Federation also. And in this interview, I've only listened to half of it, he talks about a time when aliens brought him on board a ship and, how it took him so long to speak about it. And then when he did, everyone just laughed at him. So what I'm curious about is like what the aliens were saying to him. And part of what they were saying to him was, yeah, we'll tell you guys about us once you can handle it. Basically, you guys you're not there yet, which is so sad. I'm like, oh, come on. Aren't enough of us? But it is what it is. One thing that I loved about reading this book is it has put me into contact with my own body's wisdom. And he talks about how the subconscious uses the body in a way. It is most important for the viewer's pen to move because this is the first signal to the body that a conversation is about to take place. So the conversation is between the questioner and the answerer. Those are both in you. And so you are kind of interviewing your own subconscious mind for information when you do a remote viewing session. And it takes some focus and some practice, but if you can get out of your own way and just listen to those responses and write them down faithfully, you can get some pretty interesting information. Now, I'm still eager to have the perfect sight integration that he talked about, more of a full sensory experience, but I've had little flashes and I feel like if I keep practicing, I might get up to that level. And in terms of being able to do mental influence, I'm just trying to influence my own body. I'm trying to influence myself into health, into well-being, and be able to like manage pain and also to clear away dead cells, old cells, to create flow of energy, flow of chi. Those are the things that I would like to learn mental influencing for. And he talks a lot of shit about natural psychics in this book, which is hilarious. Basically, he says that, like, people are always talking about auras and this and that. And he's like, if you're working on a crime scene, nobody needs to know what the aura of the bad guy is. They want to know what was the license plate or, so he's kind of breaking down, like, how the protocol of remote viewing is actually very useful for these practical applications. And sometimes there's a lot of fluff when it comes to the natural psychics, but sometimes those natural psychics nail it and they're the ones that really have it. So it's all over the place. But for me personally, as I develop my skills, I have those natural psychic tendencies and I've met a lot of people that have that as well. But I want to train myself to be more disciplined because I really respect it. And I think that it's worthwhile to explore both. Sometimes the natural psychics talk a lot of shit about the remote viewers because they're just like, oh, you guys are so limited. You guys are just using this really like boring way of doing things. And like we over here are just getting all these impressions and feelings. And so everybody has their different flavor and their different attitude and opinion about it. But at the end of the day, what really matters is what the information can be used for. Like, what is the result of having the information is kind of what it comes down to. So when you're accessing information at a distance, it's like, what is that giving you? How are you handling it? And also, like, is it applicable? Is it actually able to be verified in some way? Or even if not verified, has a useful outcome. Now, he gets really into some interesting stuff later in the book, and I'm going to wrap this up soon. I'm a third of the way through my skimming here, but you can see these are how my little notes go. I put a lot of exclamation points here because he calls this his spinach period. It's one of his long, boring exercises that he had to do again and again, but it was remote viewing people through death. So he says, during this time, I successfully accompanied people through the death event over to the other side about 67 times. What I learned about death through these sessions changed my entire outlook on the subject. Through all the experiences, one of 4 things usually happened on the other side. By the other side, I mean the end place, after the tunnel of light, being greeted by long dead loved ones, etc. Those experiences did happen to most of the people I accompanied into heaven, but not all. I would say that the experience was not present in about 1/3 of these people. It never happened to any of the ones I accompanied into hell, nor any of those I accompanied into oblivion. It only happened 3 times to those who wound up reincarnated. So those were the categories that he saw: heaven, hell, oblivion, and reincarnation. And and this is pretty consistent with a lot of the out-of-body stuff that people talk about too. Kind of just that, like, there's not just only one way and one thing that happens. There are some different possibilities of what can happen, and there's probably a whole lot more than what's listed here. So in the heaven realm, as he described it, this place had all the physical attributes of the real world, except that everything there was perfect. There was an ambiance of absolute and wonderful bliss. The sky was the deepest and most beautiful blue. Every tree was perfectly formed. The grass made a perfect carpet, and there was an overwhelming sense of joy and happiness. I was never allowed to stay long in this place, but was in effect gently ushered out after like a minute or so. So he could go there with them, but then it was like, go back to your body. You don't get to stay here. The hell realm that he described, he's just calling them heaven and hell, but he said sometimes people died and went into this really dark place immediately that I can only describe as a glowing blackness. The blackness was so strong that it had its own presence. There was always the visual experience of a very dull and sinister orange glow with no real form or shape, just out of sight ahead. A good look at the dull orange glow was always blocked by some person-like thing, which stood there eagerly awaiting the just dead person. I find it very hard to adequately describe the experience, which never lasted more than about 1/10 of a second. He said the entire experience of the place was one of total and complete horror. He never really saw anything that would cause the horror, but the vibe was just so strong. And that vibe would accompany him home and follow him into his dreams and daily thoughts for like a week before he could get straight again. So that's really intense. It's very interesting. He was never able to detox from these experiences, he said. Oblivion is just the version where someone just completely stops existing. And reincarnation, he said, is not as common as you would think. In his experience of viewing people, a lot of them were going to that heaven realm, it sounds like. And then every once in a while, they would become a child again of around 12 or 13 years old. That's the interesting thing. They wouldn't reincarnate into a new baby. He said every single time these people would come into like a young teenager. So he talks about how maybe these bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and many different coming of age rituals of the various cultures of humankind have something to do with this fact that souls are like entering in at that time. Who knows? I know that Rudolf Steiner, who created the Waldorf school system, had a similar theory, I believe. It might have been an Edgar Cayce thing too, I'm not sure. But something about like kids kind of coming into their body around the age of 7 or something. So it's all possible. I mean, in Tom Campbell's theory of everything, he talks about all the different ways that a soul can bounce around. It's not always this like fully, people talk about walk-ins, people talk about possession, people talk about sharing souls, two souls in one body. There's all kinds of different crazy configurations that can happen. And I'm not surprised. And then he talks a little bit more about working with the police and helping to find missing children. I like this little phrase, garbage in, garbage out, because it reminds me of everything that we consume and how important it is to put good content into our psyches. But he's talking about data in the database and just how when you're doing your remote viewing, basically just be as clean as possible and be as honest as possible. And then they had a little motto, like if you didn't write it down, you didn't get it. Because sometimes, and I've learned this from practicing remote viewing 105 times now, that sometimes I'll get a strong impression, but I'm like too scared to write it down because I'm like, what if it's wrong? And then it'll throw off my score. He's saying like, well, then you didn't get it. You have to write it down. That's part of the protocol. That's what trains you to be a good remote viewer. So I have to just let myself make more mistakes and write down more information, I think. He talks about dependability ratings, which are developed with individual remote viewers to help people know how good they are so that they can task them to like the right kinds of projects. And there's a lot of information in here, basically just about what they really did and the sessions that they did and what it was like. So again, highly recommend The Seventh Sense, The Secrets of Remote Viewing as Told by a Psychic Spy for the U.S. Military, Lynn Buchanan. Thank you, Lynn Buchanan, for your service and for your book and for all of your cool powers and for sharing with us about those cool powers. I will end this now because it's been a bit rambling. I apologize for how tired I am, but love you guys. Wanted to just do this again, and I'll be back next time with probably more on the UFO topic, but we'll still be continuing with remote viewing and Psi. All right, see you next time on Shocks Talks.